motherhood would change me, but I didn't think that losing the chance to become a mother would change me so much. Hi, friends. Thanks for being here and taking the time to listen to each of the ladies up here. I have been in your seat, in the audience of That's What She Said, and I am always amazed at what these women have been through and just in awe of the ladies who have stood on this stage and shared such vulnerable stories. It's not always easy being in the audience at That's What She Said. Listening to stories that can be really hard to hear. I know from experience how important it is to talk about all the things that you're not supposed to talk about. So you can connect with others who've been there and just know that you're never alone. Tonight, I'm going to talk about my experience with infant loss. This may be incredibly triggering for some of you here. So if you need to step out, have an ugly cry, or just mentally take yourself somewhere else, I get it, and I have been there. You're so good, girlfriend. But my story isn't just about what I lost, it's about what I gained along the way. Growing up, I always wanted to be a mom. Little Mrs. Pineapple, as I called myself, had big goals and a life plan, and I was determined to achieve everything I set my mind to and more. And it was all going to happen exactly how I planned it. That's how I approached pretty much everything. Focus on the goal, let nothing stand in my way or slow me down, and get it done. You want me to get it done faster? Tell me I can't do it. You can imagine how this carried over into my young professional life. I expected everyone to be as determined and goal-driven as myself, and I didn't believe in excuses, not for me or anyone who happened to work with me or for me. 2 years into my infertility journey and about 89 ruined plans later, I realized that things weren't always going to go my way, but I wasn't going to give up on the end goal, a baby. It was the holidays, so I was dressed to the nines in my homemade Christmas bow dress, and I'd heard one too many people tell me, oh, just relax, you'll get pregnant. So I was indulging in my newest self-prescribed medication, 3 Olives cherry vodka, and it seemed to be working pretty great. That night, I was due for the final injection of my cycle, and when my friend, who gave me all the injections, also self-medicated on 3 Olives, was prepping the needle, I convinced her to give me just a little extra follistim to ensure that I would have big, juicy follicles ready to release an egg. On Christmas morning, 2013, Santa brought me the brightest of all pink, "You're pregnant," on about 9 pregnancy tests. I was in shock. A few weeks later, at my first sonogram, we were told I was pregnant with triplets. We had won the literal infertility jackpot. I immediately connected with a few triplet moms who all assured me that the end of my pregnancy would include weeks of bed rest. So I wasted no time and went right to work. By the time I was 23 weeks pregnant, we had bought a van, completed the cutest elephant-themed nursery with 3 cribs, driven to Georgia to meet a triplet family, and brought their incredible discontinued triple stroller that I absolutely had to have, and so much more. My type A personality was thriving, and through all of this, I was feeling incredible. On April 24th, I came home from work feeling particularly exhausted and started having some mild cramps. The next morning, I called my OB, the amazing Dr. McGregor, and she suggested that I swing by the hospital just to make sure that everything was okay. Cue the hysterics, erratic driving, and picture my van screeching up to the front door at Carl at warp speed. By the time I got to labor and delivery, I'd calmed down, but Dr. McGregor was in the clinic that day, so I was checked out by the on-call doc, who I had never met. She was super young and gorgeous. I was the size of a house and super emotional, and I got real judgy. I had an important meeting at noon. I was absolutely not going to miss that. I was ready to get in and out of that hospital so I could get to work. The doctor came back into my room and with a look on her face that I will never forget. She sat down next to me, held my hand, and told me, "You are fully dilated and there's nothing we can do." I said, "Okay, sounds like we better get some undilation medication going because I've got a meeting to get to at work at noon." I did not get it at all. She explained to me that there is no magical reverse dilation medication and that I would not be leaving this hospital until I delivered my babies. That could be days, weeks, or even months. All right. So the coming weekend was supposed to be my baby shower. My sweet sister-in-law got to make those terrible phone calls, which resulted in a literal parade of floral deliveries. We got, no joke, over 40 flower arrangements, which, given the circumstances, brought us more joy and laughter than you can imagine. We set up camp in room 1010, which was right next to the OR, and followed our medical plan, which was to hope for time, so my babies would have even a chance to survive outside the womb. Every day and even every hour that I stayed pregnant was a huge win. I barely moved. I couldn't even shower, just the occasional wipe down and so much Purell. One afternoon, as I was using the bedside commode, I quickly realized that something was happening, so I was rushed to delivery. It was an incredibly bittersweet moment as my first two babies, Lottie and Blaze, were born. Alive and tiny, but just not ready for this world. We could see on the sonogram how baby C, who'd been scrunched up near my rib cage, took the opportunity to just stretch out and get comfortable in the womb. The next day, my cervix completely closed up on its own and we were able to put a cerclage in. We spent 4 hopeful days shuffling floral arrangements around the room and listening to my mom update us on every single detail and the entire history of the Bold and the Beautiful. Eventually, my body went into labor again, and after a very stressful few hours and lots of tears, my baby Lola was born still. I laid in the bed completely devastated, with no babies. My body had failed me. I was so weak and in shock at what had happened. My mom and my mother-in-law practically carried me to the bathroom to take my first real shower in what felt like months. I sat on the bench, water pouring on my head, and just cried. I had no choice but to accept help, even to take a shower. I was so defeated. Every plan I had set into motion had completely failed. And for the first time in my life, I was completely vulnerable. I had control of what felt like nothing. But something shifted in that moment. I had lost all of my babies, but I had not lost everything. It wasn't over. I had my uterus and all of my girl parts, which meant I could get pregnant again. I needed to focus on that and do everything in my power to go about things differently. I had to ask for help and accept that help when it was offered. I couldn't be that I can do it myself, my way or the highway, super driven and focused, but very lovely Lesa that I had always been. The Lesa before this tragic loss would have regrouped immediately, rewrote the plan with dates and color coding, made infertility appointments, gone back to work too soon, pretended like nothing had happened, all while hiding my emotions. Post-loss Lesa had to figure out how to survive one day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time. I wasn't going to let this loss take any more from me or lead me down a road that I didn't want to be on. I knew that my babies wouldn't want that for me. As we left the hospital, I was pushed through the lobby in a wheelchair with no shoes on and wearing pants against my will, followed by 3 carts full of flower arrangements. It was quite the spectacle. Not caring a thing about what anyone thought, I announced loudly, "I still have a uterus!" Because in that moment, leaving the hospital with no babies, my intact uterus was the only thing that I could find to be positive for. The weeks after my loss were filled with lots of really hard moments, like when I called the breastfeeding clinic to figure out what to do when my milk came in, times 3, and I heard nothing but screaming babies in the background. Or when I had to go back to the hospital because of a high fever, and the person pushing my wheelchair to maternal fetal medicine asked, "How are your babies doing?" Or when my mom, my mother-in-law, and I decided to get tattoos in memory of the triplets. As I explained my idea for 3 cute tiny elephants to the tattoo artist, he said, "That's stupid." I realized I could have let it all get to me and bring me down even more. I could have gotten really angry, and that would have been justified because my babies died. But what I realized were the comments and actions from innocent people who were genuinely trying to help were the worst. There is no manual on what to do when a baby dies. Even if there was a manual on what to do when a baby dies, it would be different for every single person, and quite honestly, different for the same person depending on the day. One of my best friends said to me, "You can be bitter or you can be better. It's your choice." Of course, I'd heard this saying before, but it took on a whole new meaning and became my mantra as I navigated life after loss. Like when I would get phone calls from every single maternity store that I'd ever shopped at, and there were several, letting me know that they were having a sale. Or when the person at the crematory told me that he was going to give me a deal and only charge me for 1 baby. I had to make a choice. I could bite this innocent person's head off and be really awful to them just for doing their job and trying to help. Or I could choose compassion. I found myself having more compassion in all situations. And what I realized was just as much as these innocent people had no clue what I was going through or how I was feeling, the same applied for everyone else in the world. I had no clue what they might be dealing with. Like when a colleague would call in sick to work, I used to get so annoyed because we had work to do. But today, I'm empathetic to the situation because that person could be dealing with something and need some time for whatever reason that I don't know a thing about. I certainly avoid asking the dreaded question, "How are you?" Because I know all too well the feeling of your legs turning to jello when asked that at the wrong time. How am I? My baby's died. There is a strong chance it is taking everything I have just to breathe and not have a meltdown. But I'm going to tell you that I'm good because that's what I'm supposed to say. Now, anybody who's experienced my driving knows that it has a lot to be desired. However, after my loss, I find myself to be much more patient on the road. When someone starts riding my tail, instead of brake checking them, I assume that they are having a medical emergency and trying to get to the hospital. Just like I was that morning, and I politely get out of their way. It's not always easy to choose to be kind and empathetic and compassionate. For years, I'd see pregnant women and babies out in public, and I would just scowl. Now, luckily, triplet sightings are incredibly rare, but you cannot even imagine how many things come in 3s or involve triplets. When I think back over the years, it was on my hardest days that my heart found the most healing. And over time, that healing has evolved into happiness and gratitude. I am so lucky to share today that I have 2 amazing living children and balanced co-parenting with their dad. Yeah, we divorced, but losing the triplets did bring us closer together for a little bit. Now, my divorce story is pretty good. You're gonna need some cocktails, so see me at the after party. My heart is so full today, and I know without a doubt that I am a better person and a better mom because of my loss. And that incredibly handsome silver fox in the audience? Hands off, ladies. He's mine. Soon after I physically recovered, I reached out to Carl Philanthropy because I desperately wanted a bench to honor my babies. They were not going to a cemetery because babies don't belong there. As it turned out, Carl was in the process of building an infant memorial garden with 2 benches. I raised the funds and was able to celebrate Lottie, Blaze, and Lola's first birthday sitting on our bench just days before I delivered my sweet Hudson. 2 years later, that young, gorgeous, on-call doctor who gave me the worst news of my life delivered my last baby via scheduled C-section. As I was laying on the delivery table, I told her that I was naming my baby after her. And within minutes, my precious Cooper girl came into the world. I often think of the families who sit on our bench and visit the garden. I'll never meet them, and I'll never know what they're going through. But I can hope that in their saddest moments, they can find something to be grateful and positive for, like a uterus.